Hello, Professor
Jiang Xueqin
is being promoted to viral levels and has been given a gigantic platform by very popular leftist medias and channels. So, who is he? This quote-unquote professor is a Chinese-Canadian educator and YouTuber born back in 1976 in Guangdong, China. When he was a kid, his family moved to Toronto, Canada. His dad worked as a short order cook and his mom was a seamstress. He became a Canadian citizen, went to Yale, graduated in 1999 with a degree in English literature, and then headed back to Beijing in 2000. We'll get more into that later. But that's where he's been building his life and career ever since. So what does he actually do? For years, he's been deep into education reform in China. He was deputy principal at Shenzhen Middle School, ran programs at Peking High School, University High School, China, and right now he teaches history and philosophy at Moonshot Academy in Beijing. He's also written books, worked as a journalist for places like the New York Times, Chinese edition, and Wall Street Journal. And today, he's best known for his YouTube channel called Predictive History. It has 1.5 million subscribers. Over that, actually, now. He records his live lectures on world history, geopolitics, global trends, using ideas like game theory and something he calls secret history to predict what might happen next. And here's why he suddenly went viral in early 2026, this year. So back in 2024, he gave a lecture called The Iran Trap. In it, he predicted Donald Trump would win again, that the US would get pulled into a war with Iran, and that America would eventually lose in a long, grinding fight. Well, Trump won, the conflict kicked off, and the first two predictions already came true. Clips of that lecture blew up everywhere online, and now people are calling him China's Nostradamus because his forecasts are hitting way too close to home. Quite interesting, right? Well, again, he's a high school teacher, was a middle school teacher in China. According to his channel Predictive History, he has used models and theories to understand history, to teach about our current predicament, and to make predictions about the future. A model that he frequently uses is game theory, that he is often criticized completely using incorrectly, and has several videos analyzing events with this model, including his most recent ones involving the Iran war. I, as well as eventually, hopefully, most of you, will have major problems with his presentations when it comes to his accuracy, how he arrives at his conclusions, and how he does presentations. I watch many of his so-called lectures, and about Ukraine/Putin from him, one of his recent ones stuck out to me. I'm going to use that video in specific to show a few, examples of where, we'll just call him from now on, Professor J, where Professor J goes wrong, and the reoccurring structural issues across his channel to watch out for. In the first 13 minutes of his video, he discusses the Ukraine war and uses a game theory counterfactual to argue that US/NATO policies towards Ukraine is self-defeating. If you remove Western support, the issues Ukraine's military already had in 2022 with weapons and ammo, air defense, funding, logistics, it all gets compounded to such a degree that waging an insurgency, let alone winning a war versus Russia with zero external, is virtually impossible. The other parts of the video is riddled with factual errors and unfounded claims. For example, he claimed that the Ukraine war wasn't being ran in Kyiv with Ukrainian leadership, but actually NATO runs the entire war from Brussels, with NATO commandos literally issuing commands to Ukrainian troops, and then uses this to explain that because NATO is literally running the war, Russian troops have adopted to NATO strategy and have emerged successful. The problem I have with this claim is that it directly contradicts his counterfactual, where Ukraine wins the war via guerrilla warfare because he claimed that Russia is incapable of fighting Ukraine with zero NATO help. But then once again, NATO support is introduced. Russia suddenly gains the ability to adapt without explaining how Russia would adapt in more dire conditions. His argument suggests that fighting a NATO-backed Ukraine is easier for Russia than dealing with an independent Ukrainian insurgency with zero outside help. When he talks about Vladimir Putin, he uses a couple of anecdotes from his biography that state that Putin's mother is religious and that Putin worked with the KGB. He uses these two anecdotes to spin an entire story that there was a secret Orthodox church and KGB faction that saw Stalin as a messiah, spent decades grooming Putin as the second coming of Stalin, and is now using the Ukraine war to fulfill a religious prophecy about conquering Turkey and restoring the Byzantine Empire. And he used two anecdotes to extrapolate the civilizational narrative that doesn't even come close to logically following the premises and sounds more like a mythical story. So in short, my biggest issues with him so far are he misuses and misunderstands game theory. His presentations tend to sound more like telling a civilizational story than an explanation. He looks for a grand overarching narrative and assumes assumptions to fill in the gaps with his arguments. He tends to make extraordinary claims without evidence. He covers a wide range of topics, which can come at the expenses of depth. In this case, leads to a shallow understanding of the subject, resulting in bad analysis. I understand why people are drawn to his content because he seems independent and encourages skepticism of authority and state narratives. He is skilled at simplifying complex frameworks, making predictions. His videos on geopolitics, his errors can be so egregious that I wouldn't recommend his analysis. I'll get more into his connections, nefarious connections, very soon here, which will make it more clear as well. And yes, he sometimes does sound like another paranoid theorist. You know, they're everywhere on social media. And, you know, I've gotten into some of them too. I agreed with them, but he's anything from a paranoid conspiracy theorist. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, he is a Chinese intelligent asset working with them to destroy Western civilization. The war has begun years ago, and it's in our minds. They're attacking and destroying America within, and it's very, very evident now, more than ever, I would say, and it will continue to become more evident. So here's yet even more to be aware of. He promotes an extremely niche and not widely accepted subfield, which synthesizes statistics and history, while not having any background in statistics or history. He isn't a professor. Again, I say he isn't a professor. His educational background is a bachelor in English literature. He teaches at a small private school. He has a lack of citation pretty much for all of his videos. Where are they? We don't fucking know. There's pretty much none. Zero. There isn't enough time between his videos to thoroughly research a new topic that he does not have a background in. At most, he has the time to do cursory research on a level of a college student BSing a paper last minute. And in general, these are good steps for evaluating YouTube channels in this category of videos in just a few minutes. So number one, check for citations. Not following a basic research principle like citing sources means that they are most likely cutting corners elsewhere in their research. It also makes it nearly impossible for a layperson to fact check themselves in a reasonable amount of time. Number two, Check how often they post and how closely related their topics of their videos are compared with the length of their videos. If someone is posting 20 plus minute videos about new topics every week, they aren't doing enough research. The longer the video, the longer the time should be. If topics of videos are closely related and the author has some level of expertise in the subject, the gap between videos can be much smaller. A professor specializing in the history of colonialism in Africa, for example, could probably crank out high-quality 20-minute plus videos on colonialism in Africa every other day for quite a while, assuming they have no other obligations. Look up the owner of the channel if possible and see if they have any qualifications in the field they are posting about. If their name isn't publicly available and they are making videos on history or politics about that, which they claim to be an expert in, which in this case and often they aren't on the internet, it's often a red flag. Some very good creators don't share their identity. So this one more applies if anything else about the channel seems fishy. And of course, for any type of video, clickbait titles and thumbnails are often a bad sign, even more so in academia. I believe it is a red flag that he leans so heavily on game theory, but doesn't do any of the maths. He is just claiming he is doing game theory. He does often make strong assertions that I rarely hear serious scholars or educators make when dealing with such a complex topic. Most of the connections and predictions he made were far-fetched, and some of the things he described and explained often seemed to be dramatic oversimplifications. And here's where we get into the root of things. And one of the many parts, but one of even more that is a red flag, is about the fact that he was deported from China in 2002 after being accused of spying, yet he's still in China. His story just skips the entire return to China arc. That's concerning. And he does seem to operate with a chip on his shoulder, a kind you might expect from a loyal Chinese nationalist. Why would he teach game theory and English while being employed in Beijing on YouTube? That's blocked in China, Beijing. Yes, he can use a VPN. That doesn't explain it, though. There's just so many loads of questions, and I've noticed with things that have been proven right, these psyops after psyops that have proven right, there's all this confounding confusion that makes no sense that eventually turns out, well, but it's quite certain he's a charlatan, and it's really quite sad that so many people seem to like and have made this man viral. And I think a lot of it's because of fear of what's going on overseas in the Middle East, and are so incredibly influenced by him or this account, and the man is the spokesperson, which is most likely the case. And I might mention that his lectures, there are almost always no sounds, movement, almost nothing ever from his quote-unquote classroom in Beijing, China. Yet YouTube is blocked in China, and here he is, going viral on YouTube from China. So of course you can use a VPN and skirt around their firewall, all that. But I mean, come on. People much less notable in China have been thrown in camps and died for far less for what this man has been doing. And so it's time to think a little bit, people, and think critically. I know we have it easy in the West, and it's easy just to drool while we watch the next episode of some stupid fucking show. But it's time to fucking use our brains and think critically. This man is against the West and wants it to fall just as the people handling him do, while laughing as it does while the algorithm makes it possible. And at the end of the day, he is not the academic he says he is. He is against the Western world and is the absolute definition of a wolf in sheep's clothing. So don't be a sheep, think. And so my fellow wage slaves, peasants, drifters, outcasts, and thinkers, given that he's lying about being a professor, he is indeed a grifter and not what he says he is. He's doing what most every content creator does. Tries to build an audience to make money. He is without a doubt paid by the Chinese government on top of it all. All of his rhetoric is talking about how America is on the verge of collapse and how every move NATO, the West, and America is bad and weak and moving in the direction of failure. He downplays the Chinese government's objectives and paints them out to be just a benign government that is not a threat to anyone and just wants the world And so, fellow wage slaves, peasants, drifters, outcasts, thinkers, given that he's lying about being a professor, I'd say he's far from it, and he's a grifter. He's being used. He's also just doing what most content creators do. Try to build an audience and make money. But he's doing it with quite the agenda, I must say. All of his rhetoric is talking about how America is on the verge of collapse and how every move NATO, the West, and America make is bad and weak and moving in the direction of failure. He downplays the Chinese government's objectives and paints them out to just be a benign government that is no threat to anyone and just wants the world to chug along and be peaceful. I wish that too, but that's not the case, folks. Don't be a sheep. Think. Thank you.